Tim Bontemps. Which one do you want to start with?
Let's start with the one that I didn't know nothing about. This article he wrote.
So Tim Bontemps wrote an article about the offensive explosion in the NBA this year. Now, in a slight defense of Tim Bontemps, he set it up with the scoring leaders, how we have, I think, like 6 or 7 30-plus point game scores. But then he goes on to reference what teams are doing, and he talks about Denver and how everyone is utilizing space. And I'm reading this article, just checking through, and I'm saying, there's Luka references and Dame references and Steph and KD, and there's Denver, Mike Malone. Read the whole article.
Denver, bro. Come on, man.
Not a single reference to the Sacramento Kings. Now, this isn't about title contenders or top team. This is about the explosive nature of offense in the NBA. And it brought me to a conclusion that I only suspected a few weeks ago when he put his head up his ass to talk about the Tyrese Halliburton trade. I realized he hasn't seen a single Sacramento Kings game this season.
No, that sounds about right. Sounds about right.
Is that your boy?
How do you...
Are you friends with Tim Bontemps?
James, answer this for me. How do you talk about the explosion in offense in the NBA and not mention the highest rated offense in the history of the game?
I don't know. You know what? I can text him right now and we can discuss this. I'm shocked. Because I haven't read it, but if he put that out there and he did not mention the Sacramento Kings, that to me doesn't make any sense at all. This is and look, Tim is a good dude. He lived out here for a long time, covering Warriors and in the Bay Area. He's back east at this point, but I'm surprised. Maybe it's just past his bedtime. He doesn't stay up to watch the Kings play.
His job is to watch everybody.
NBA players are piling up points.
Yeah.
Here's what's driving the league's record performances. And again, no reference whatsoever to what Sacramento has done. No reference to the fact they're one of 3 teams. He references the other 2, not in this regard, but he references the other 2 that have 200 plus made 3 players with 200 plus made threes.
Well, I talk about this all the time, that the Kings aren't getting that national love. And as fans, we have to be prepared for this, right? We're not going to get the calls once the playoffs start, but people are still counting us out. They're not even counting us in as part of the NBA. Like, you're just this little team over here. We don't know what's going to happen. You've got this beam thing happening. We're not sure. But until we really accomplish something, you're not going to get some coverage the way that we think that we deserve. And we know that we deserve, honestly. And I like that James was kind of like, if he didn't really put it in there, like, you're giving him a little space. Like, maybe it's a smaller print at the bottom that says, by the way, I forgot to mention the King.
My bad. My bad, yo.
But clearly, I mean, it's not there. But there are some folks like Charles Barkley, that are trying to bring the Kings further into the national conversation. And we're getting closer to that as the playoffs get near. But I'm not surprised. I'm never surprised when the Kings aren't mentioned, even when the stats show that we should be in the conversation. It's infuriating, but it's not surprising at this point.
I'd also point out that, like, we've talked about this before. I think a lot of people, they've used the Kings as a punching bag for so long that they don't know how to associate the Kings with anything other than that. And they've created their own narratives about Sacramento and about the team and about the ownership and all that stuff. And they don't want to be wrong. And so it's hard. Like, they'll ignore it rather than be wrong. And so, not to say that that's what's going on with Tim, but I certainly seen it from a lot of national voices where they're out just spouting nonsense, because it's the nonsense they've always spouted. They don't do their homework. They're not fully in tune with what's happening in not only the league as a whole, but in Sacramento. They don't know. It's why, our guy Mark Spears and Sam Amick, these are national writers that are here at games all the time. They know what's happening here in Sacramento. And so those are voices that I'm listening to and that I'm watching, and hopefully they can help change narratives. But it's year one. Like, the Kings they've got to prove that this isn't a fluke, that this isn't a one-time thing. They've got to do this 2 or 3 times before they start changing the narrative around their own team. They've got to be able to re-sign Sabonis. All of these things play into a bigger picture that is Sacramento. You don't just get a free pass from a lot of these guys for one good season.
Well, I don't think it's about it being a free pass, honestly. Like, if they're watching NBA games night after night, if they're going on the websites to see where people are in the leaderboards, that will tell you the story. That's how you
Right.
write your story based on the data.
Right.
They're just ignoring. I mean, when you think about other leagues, the Cubs hadn't won in 100 years, and the Red Sox never. When they started winning, they started getting coverage. People were talking about how awesome their players were and what they were doing. I don't know why the Kings continue to be able to be non-existent to national press because they have access to the information. They
Right.
can be reporting. It's not a thing where it's like, I don't know how to change the narrative. You are deciding to not change the narrative. You're deciding to not include them in the conversation. That's my perspective. Because you have, again, the information is there. We can see the stats. When they play any other team, you see who won that game. And if you're still counting them out, win after win after win, that's a decision you're making.
Yeah, at this point, it's not December anymore. I mean, this is a team that's going into the playoffs as the third seed, and I don't care if they were out of the playoffs for 116 years. Your job is to report on what's going on right now, and this is your job. You portray yourself as somebody that covers the league. This is what I always say. If the Win Horses, the Bon Temps, all these guys, if you want to just say, look, I don't cover the league. I cover the Lakers, the Warriors, the Celtics, and the Knicks.
And the Bulls.
Yeah. That's who I cover. I will respect that and say, you know what? That's what you do. All right. I know what it is. I know what I'm getting from you. I know these are the teams that you're only watching. But you're telling me you cover the NBA. Well, I need you to cover the NBA. I'm not worried about your sleep. I'm not worried about what mattress you got. I'm not worried about your time zone or nothing like that. You present yourself as if, and they always want to talk about salaries and all this stuff. You're paid handsomely to cover the NBA. Cover the NBA. That's what I always say.
Yeah, but I'll tell you too, like the perspective of Sacramento, it's not of a Boston or a Chicago. So you're right. When the Red Sox and the Cubs start winning again, it's a huge story because those are major markets. People want to forget about Sacramento, whether they're good or they're bad. It's an outpost in the NBA. It's like far off in the distance that a lot of people just aren't paying attention to. And it's not LA. Even the Warriors were non-existent for years and years and years. It's only been during this run where the Warriors have like awoken like a national consciousness to them. Before that, like they're just like the Kings. Nobody even cared. And they're in a major market, number 6 market in America, where, Sacramento is like 19th, 20th. So people want to forget about Sacramento, whether, for a bunch of reasons. And they don't have a KD. They don't have, we can talk about Fox and Sabonis and how good they've been and all that stuff, but like Sabonis isn't sexy. He's a lunch pail guy. Fox can be, but it's taken a while for him to get there. And he needs to prove that he can do it multiple times and before he starts getting sort of the Donovan Mitchell treatment and stuff like that. But at this point, they just haven't had enough of that exposure. And I think the guys that have written stories were, the Slam magazine story, we're seeing these stories all across the league, whether it's Jake Fisher or, name that reporter that's got to sit down with the Kings when they're on a East Coast road trip. We're starting to see a little bit more respect sent their way, but it's going to take a while to build that cachet. They're a fun story right now. The Beam is a fun story. They got to prove that there's more substance to it. And I get it. I get the frustration, but I'm someone who's covered this team forever and been like, and for years they had the best center in the NBA without any question. And he didn't get his props. And a lot of that was on him, but that didn't mean he wasn't great. And no one wanted to give him that greatness title even until after he left here and then he got hurt.
But I'll say real quick, Naaman, and not to come at you, Ham, but they don't have to win for 5 straight years to write an article where you're talking about this year, the explosion in offense, and you mentioned the Sacramento
I
Kings.
totally agree.
Like that isn't a legacy thing. You talking about what's going on this year, and you leave out the highest scoring team in the league this year. That's just I don't know what, because I'm always a optimist when it comes to these guys. Bon Temps, like you said, I'm sure he's a great guy, great individual. We joke about it or whatever. He hadn't done nothing to nobody, but I don't understand why this continues to happen. I just think it's laziness.
It's laziness. I completely agree with you.